All right, it is 7:05, so I think we will start the presentation here and get going. I want to thank everybody, welcome everyone to the presentation this evening. My name is Jesse Stedman. I'm the town planner here in Stowe. The purpose of tonight's really the second forum that we have, second public forum that we've held as a project team for the Stow Acres master planning effort. I know I see some familiar names from the February 10th forum, which was the first time we had a large discussion and kind of got the ball rolling. So tonight we really want to talk about how the plans have progressed since that first public forum, and how some of the ideas, questions, and other other interests that we've heard from folks around town have kind of been able to allow the plans evolve. And I definitely want to thank everybody who did respond to the Stow Acres plan at stow-ma.gov email address with their questions. That really helped us focus on what are the types of things that are important to residents as they kind of contemplate a project of this scale. And so that was very helpful, as well as the folks that took part in a focus group to help provide a little more focused feedback, frankly, on the progression of the plans. So just a couple of housekeeping things tonight as far as asking questions. The best way to do that is to chat directly to the host. So everybody has the ability to send a question to the host, and we'll collect those and make sure that we have them collected after the meeting as well, and we'll be able to answer some questions at the end of the discussion. So before I let everybody else introduce themselves, I did want to just say that this project is something that has continued to excite me as a planner. This is really, I don't think it's dramatic to say that this is a once in a generation opportunity that we are talking about with this project. And I say that because it's a chance to bring so many different plans and ideas and goals that the town has expressed in so many different ways through master plans, complete streets prioritization plans, open space and recreation plans, housing production plans. The list goes on and on. If you look and really research into those, you see so many of those principles expressed in the types of ideas and proposals that have been able to come out of this collaborative process. So, for me on that professional level, I think it's really exciting. I've been happy and encouraged to see that others are also recognizing some of those goals and those gains that can be made as well. So I think tonight is going to be really interesting. We took a lot of comments and the comments to heart, and I think we've been able to provide a series of updated information that's going to be really helpful for everyone to understand kind of where this project has been and where it could be headed. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to other members of the project team to introduce themselves, and we'll get going. Thank you.
I think I was next on the list. I'm Mark O'Hagan from MCO Associates. I am developing the residential component of the housing component of the overall project. My background has been almost exclusively within affordable housing for the last 30 years or so. I do a lot of development in conjunction with 40B. Also have a service business in which we help operate the lotteries and work to get individuals and families into homes and apartments. So affordable housing, it's important to me. It always has been, even outside of my work life. For this project, and I think just to kind of reinforce what Jesse had said, is that the proactive approach I think that the town has taken in really, looking to work and collaborate with the property owner as well as myself has been a unique experience from my sense. And I think that hopefully people will see that those ideas and the energy from the variety of groups from conservation and planning and housing will all be reflected in the ultimate plan, which we're all excited about. So, and I'm a local resident. I live in Bolton. I've been right next door for a long time. So I'm looking forward to working with the community.
Okay, good evening. My name is Peter Brown. I'm with Stow Acres, the owner of the property. And we've been very happy to be part of this process. We think that the process has produced a very good plan, and we're looking forward to seeing the town's response. We believe that it's a very exciting plan that provides for redevelopment on a small portion of the property while also providing additional benefits to the town on the majority of the site, which a conventional subdivision approval wouldn't have allowed. We hope that the people of Stowe will agree with us and take the first step at the town meeting and approve the first step in this process. Thanks very much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bob Wilbur. I'm the president of the Stow Conservation Trust. And about a year ago, we started hearing rumors that there were some big plans in the works involving Stow Acres. Stow Acres is the largest unprotected property in the town of Stowe at 330 acres. So those kinds of rumors really got our attention. And we heard that there was even a possibility that the entire property might be sold for a mega development. I reached out to Kathy, conservation with the town, and Jesse, planning, and discussed what options we had before us. And we all agreed that although the property was in Chapter 61B, and therefore the town would have a right of first refusal if the property were sold, the idea of purchasing it for somewhere between 10 and $15 million was just not a practical option. And so we came up with the idea of hiring a talented, experienced land use planner and reaching out to the owner, Peter Brown, and the prospective developer, Mark O'Hagan, and ask them to put their plans on hold and engage with us in a collaborative planning exercise with a goal of really coming up with a comprehensive vision with multiple components that would have many more benefits to Stowe as a community than what any of us could have come up with on our own. And I'm very appreciative to those two individuals for agreeing to do what we asked. We have, the group of us has met regularly throughout the COVID pandemic. We get to see each other without our masks on in sessions like this. And I also want to make sure to credit Peter Flinker. I think Peter Flinker from Dodson and Flinker, based in Northampton, has done an excellent job. And so we're very excited to share some more details about that comprehensive vision tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. And I'm Kathy Farah. I'm the Conservation Director for Stowe. I've lived in Stowe for 20 years and spent my whole life working in conservation and planning. So this is a very exciting project for me. And I think it's probably fair to say that it's one of the most innovative projects that I've been involved in my career, and particularly meaningful because it's here in my hometown. And I think many of us have spent a lot of time kind of wondering and worrying about what would happen to Stow Acres. And one of the things that's really exciting to me about this partnership is the opportunity to really develop a comprehensive plan and vision for the whole property, rather than seeing piecemeal decisions made about the two courses and potentially by folks other than those in this community. So I want to thank all the other members of the team. It's been a great collaborative effort. There have been bumps along the way, and there probably will continue to be some, but everybody's been honest and creative and hardworking and thoughtful together. So we look forward to hearing your response to what we have tonight.
Does that lead to us? I guess it does. I'm Peter Flinker. I'm here with Tia Novak from my staff at Dodson and Flinker. And as you heard, we're planning and landscape architecture consultants who really have the privilege to have been working on this for the last 9 months. And as you've heard, it's a really unusual project. because of this collaboration between the town and the landowner and the developer and others. And so we're really pleased to be here again tonight to show you how it's been evolving. And so I'm going to start by sharing my screen and showing you the latest version of a PowerPoint that has been growing and growing, but I promise we didn't add everything to it tonight. We did cut some things out, but what I'm going to quickly do is sort of bring you through the thought process from the beginning, which really started at looking at the whole site in its context, as you see here, from the Elizabeth Brook to the Assabet River, and really thinking about it all the way from Hudson Road over to 62 Gleesondale Road, and trying to understand how the site fits into all of that, and how we can actually use the redevelopment of the site to make the town better and make this area work better, which is, again, a really great opportunity, because in a lot of times when a development happens, it's often how can we sort of mitigate the effects of that development. Here we're sort of using the development to do some wonderful things, which we'll talk about. So we started by looking at, again, the whole site in the context of the topography and the drainage patterns in the area. We did a lot of work of mapping and overlaying different resources from state sources and some surveys that have been done of the site. So looking at the wetlands and water bodies along the streams, looking at what areas are in floodplain, which means that they're more likely to be flooded when there's heavy rains and so on. And then really thinking about how both the natural resources of the site, the ecology, and what we call the cultural resources, the history and the scenic quality of the site really play out in the different areas of the property. And we came up with this as kind of a guiding framework, an open space framework. And what you see here in the sort of green and yellow are the sort of the core areas that really we want to protect and enhance. And these, of course, are following the stream systems of the Elizabeth Brook and the river and all the tributaries, and really thinking about how these main areas connect to the surrounding neighborhoods. So again, can we sort of, by carefully preserving certain parts of the site, extend an open space network that makes everything work better around it? And of course, we looked at, what could you do under the zoning right now, which unfortunately is only pretty much residential development. And the most likely way that will happen is with 1.5 acre lots. So basically it would be looping roads and cul-de-sacs throughout the entire site. This is looking at the north part of the site. This is looking at the south. And basically, we did this exercise ourselves. These were done by a previous engineer, but it's more or less this kind of development that's the most likely thing on the property. And of course, that erases everything that we'd like to see protected. So if we go back to that sort of open space framework, we really saw in the areas that are not colored, 3 parts of the site that are probably most conducive to development. And we did a lot of plans and alternatives for each of those, and really settled on that larger site on the north course as the most developable part of the property physically, but also the least impactful on the resources that we're trying to protect. And then this, if you attended the workshop in February, was the resulting master plan. So it includes continued golf, at least for the next 10 years probably, a 9-hole golf course on 60 acres of the property. It includes provision for perhaps 12, 15 acres of recreational use that the town would, through further planning and design, establish. And what we have here is just kind of a placeholder for that. It includes the potential for a circumferential trail that could provide public walking and biking space throughout the property. This, as shown, itself would be, I think, over 1.75 miles long. And then around the site, and particularly in the wetlands on the west part of the site, sort of buffer zones and reclamation areas so that the native ecology could be sort of rebuilt, and perhaps even replacing some of the areas of the golf course with natural vegetation, bringing them back to wetlands and so on. You'll hear more about that in a little while. And then sort of through this process, we also looked at developing part of the site as a walkable sort of compact village, and that amounts to about 32 acres. So if we look at the entire site, we have that northern part with the different provisions for development and conservation I showed you. And then the entire south course of 151 acres would be preserved as permanent open space and kept in golf and other uses. So if we look at the entire property, and also there would be a provision for a trail system on the south part that would extend from the north, from Elizabeth Brook basically to the Assabet River. So if we look at the entire site of 328 acres, only about 32 acres would be actually developed for the roads and buildings within the village, which is only 10%, which is really extraordinary. If you're familiar with any kind of conservation development, usually people are happy if you protect half the site, but here we have the potential to protect much more. And then we've also been looking hard at, well, what would the development part of the site look like? We don't want to have more sort of McMansions sort of spreading across the site, nor do we want to have ugly, multifamily housing that would be very different than what you typically find in Stowe. So we looked around and at different models for smaller, more compact development. This is a cottage community in Concord. This is another cottage community in Dennis. And both of these really represent a new movement in housing in Massachusetts where we have smaller units. And so instead of one really big house, you might have 2 or 3 smaller houses, but the impact overall is the same or less because you have less sort of dependence on the car and you're really using less of the site. Another great example we've looked at is something called Red Mill Village in Norton. And you see how the buildings are there, but they're really part of a larger project which has a lot of open space, traditional streets lined with trees and sidewalks and beautiful open spaces. And from the air, it looks like, wow, that's a lot of houses. But the fact that you have those houses closer together allows you to preserve more of the open space around the site, but also do wonderful things within the project itself. So you can have, again, sort of wonderful town parks and greens and open spaces. And you also have this wonderful setting for the houses where you have tree-lined streets and sidewalks, and you can walk down to the corner. In this case, there's a little corner store as part of the project. So it's really going back to the traditional principles of village design that have been sort of worked out over centuries in New England. And in fact, if you look at the most expensive and the most desirable places in New England, they're often the ones with tiny houses on small lots in a wonderful village setting. And that's kind of the model that we're really aiming for. So again, some of the principles which we've taken, and these are going to be really injected directly into the development program. So part of what we're doing as a team is really trying to figure out what are going to be the rules that govern this development. You'll be seeing a lot of the possibilities today, and it's going to continue to evolve. But these specific principles or rules are going to remain in place to guide the project as it goes forward into design and further planning and development. So a compact and efficient form, something that promotes walking and biking. Automobiles will be welcome, but they won't be out front. Literally, they'll be put behind the buildings. You'll be able to drive to your house, but you won't be able to park in the front yard. We're looking for diverse housing choices for people at every stage of their lives. And something that's really important is that it's organized around the public realm of streets and parks and greenways, rather than the private realm of the house lots, which is what typically dominates what we think of as a suburban subdivision. So again, this is going back to traditional sort of town and village design principles. And then connecting the village to the surrounding landscape is really important. And again, a wonderful opportunity on this project where we have recreation on the site and also connections that'll link to the rest of the town. So this was the initial master plan from February. Since then, we've been looking at a lot of specific ideas for how the village could be designed. Again, really trying to come up with a kit of parts for different house sizes, different kind of lot sizes and arrangements so that as the development and design process continues, there are some rules in place that ensure that it has this wonderful village feel. So a very important part is that, again, the buildings are organized around public spaces, whether the street or this kind of town green at the center. And we have different sizes of houses and different sizes of house lots. So there's a lot of built-in diversity. And what that's really evolved into is this sort of guiding master plan. And this includes the part of the site that's going to be developed. And in addition to that, part of the sort of development pod, if you will, are buffer zones along the outside that will incorporate that trail system, as well as setbacks against the neighboring properties. There's areas to the north along the Elizabeth Brook, which will have the wells that'll serve the property. And again, these have to be protected along with this circular wellhead protection area. And then there's a lot of open space, as you see in green, that sort of winds through the development itself. So we have sort of the wells to the north. We have part of it that's set aside for cottages on sort of a shared lot, cottages on individual lots, what we call these interior lots, which have sort of alleys in the rear, providing access for garages, and exterior lots, which I'll show you have shared driveways. And then we have senior apartments, sort of in the core of the project, overlooking the town green. And then it hasn't been designed yet, but there's room for a small community center at the entrance of the property across from the Stow Acres Golf Club. So we're really going to be looking in the next few minutes at how these different lots might be arranged, again, so that they fit into the village, but also are very nice places to live. So we have these exterior lots, which are somewhat larger, and then within the property, these so-called interior lots. So this is sort of two exterior lots. And one of the things we're trying to do, again, is to keep the parking available, but not let it dominate the scene, as it often does in a typical suburban development. So we're doing that by having shared driveways to a pair of garages that are what we call side loaded. They're on the side of the buildings. And that allows us to eliminate half of the driveways along the street. And so the street can be a wonderful sort of sidewalks, street trees, and greenery, rather than a lot of parked cars and driveways. And in the rear, we have room for private gardens and patios and so on, and a lot of planting. Again, one of the advantages of having a more compact development style is that the investment in planting goes a lot further. So instead of being spread out over an acre and a half, it's sort of used where it really can benefit in terms of creating a setting for those buildings and privacy for their inhabitants. So that was the shared driveway option around the exterior. This is the alley homes. So these have sort of a shared street in the front that everyone has sort of a nice sidewalk and an entrance to the front porch of their home. And in the rear, there's an alley, which is relatively narrow, but provides access to individual garages in the back of each of the lots. And in between, there's lots of room for private front yards and private backyards with patios and hot tubs and all the other things that people might want to have. So again, if I could show you, 50 traditional village centers and towns in New England that people really love to live in, and they're designed much as this is designed. And so we're really picking up on those traditional planning principles. And here's a sort of computer illustration of one of those exterior lots with a pair of houses sharing a driveway. And you can see this is the public street with probably parking on one side, lined with street trees and sidewalks, and separated from the private yards by sort of fences and hedges to sort of make a clear demarcation between what's public and what's private. Oh, and in the rear, you can see each house has room for some private gardens or just lawn space, patio space, barbecues, and what have you. And so it has all of the amenities that you might have in a larger suburban house. But here you have also the advantage of living in a wonderful village. And this is the lots that are with the rear, somewhat smaller lots with the rear alley, providing access to those garages. But again, it's the same idea where we have a shared village street with a separation of fences and hedges between the public sidewalk and the private gardens. And in the rear of the houses, in between the garages, we have lots of space for nice private gardens and trees and whatever people might want. So here's some images of what that might look like on the ground. And again, these are based on the actual buildings, which Mark O'Hagan will show you in a few minutes. And this is all the true dimensions of that plan that I showed you. So there's a street with parking on one side, a nice 5-foot sidewalk with a 4-foot tree belt, a little setback for a front yard with fences or hedges separating you from the entrance and the porch of each individual building. And again, if you look at this, it looks much like any New England village does. And often these are really wonderful places to live. So another view of the street. This has sort of the exterior lots on one side and the village lots on the other. But they really share, again, this public space that the street creates. This is on the exterior lots, a little bit further setback between the street and the front, give them a little bit different feeling. And then again, lots of room, even on the smaller setbacks of the interior lots, for private gardens and trees and plantings and so on. And then plenty of room, as I said, for private patios and people to enjoy their barbecues and whatnot. Or a little fire ring here in the backyard of one of the village homes, or a hot tub for people who want that. But again, a lot of this ideas in terms of the planting and the pergolas and screening is something that has been done, for 100 years. And so we're really building that kit of parts again based on these traditional village planning elements because they work. And we know they add to the quality of our lives living in a village, and also make it a much better place for everybody. So here's room for play set in the backyard and terraces and so on. So even though you don't have a lot of space, all of that space is put to good use, and that'll be part of the development program. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark O'Hagan now, who's going to speak about sort of how this turns into the developer's vision of the property. So Mark, if you request the ability to turn the slides, I can let you do that.
I think I already have it. Now you can send it to me.
Okay. And take it away.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Peter. And I think, what was important and why we wanted to stress it, up front is, the relationship from structure to structure and the garaging in the streets from a development perspective has always been one of the most important things that I've been focused on. Everybody's been into properties, and one of the hardest things with denser developments is dealing with vehicles and dealing with garaging and dealing with parking. The cars are just everywhere. So we spent a significant amount of time in terms of developing how vehicles can relate to the property, and with the alleys and the rear loaded garages is extremely important to have an appealing front streetscape, as you see here, and using the side loaded garages in the other homes. So what I wanted to just do a quick run through, and you can see some of the imaging from 3D, is the different kind of the initial plans that we're focused on. I'm trying to see if this will click forward. Let me see. I don't know if I have the right, Peter.
Oh, you have to ask me for it. However that.
Yeah, it says I'm enabled. If you can click it to the next one, that would be fine. So, and one of really kind of the core components in the discussions for the community that we've been dealing with is wanting to make sure that there really was a range of housing. Everything from inexpensive rentals for senior rentals, and from a rental component, instead of some of the larger buildings that Peter had shown with the Ghostbusters X on top of it, we developed a plan to do really individual cottages for rent. So we've got a combination of some units that are 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms. This cottage is just a 2-bedroom home with living and dining and family space and kitchen space on the first floor, 2 bedrooms up on the second level, but really exemplifies some of the design aspects that we're trying to incorporate in the overall development. So a very kind of a modern farmhouse with some colonial details, and also things that provide for a range of flexibility in design. We're planning to have a range of colors for the properties, some strong gables on some of the smaller houses. We've got, some board and batten details in the gables as well as in the porch area. And these types of things can certainly change. This could be siding. We could have, more board and batten, some traditional asphalt roofing, some of the metal roofing. Really, all of the homes and the rental cottages focus on, this front porch to welcome people, and they're generally big enough and usable for people to sit out and enjoy and meet their neighbors as they're going by. You want to go to the next slide? This is, again, another rental bungalow. This is designed, this is only about 1,200 square feet, I think 1,225 square feet. This would provide for a 1-level living. This is really ornamental upstairs, just to break up the look. Nice broad front porch. The inside on floor plans, if you want to move it ahead. Very kind of simple layout, but modern in how it will live. You've got a nice size island kitchen, dining area, living room up front, 2 comfortable sized bedrooms, both 2 full-size bathrooms. Again, a nice wide front porch. The porch is probably 30 feet long and about 6 or 7 feet wide. So very usable. Rear door that could have a small patio for barbecue and such outside. This having kind of provides for a 1-level living, both for people that may be handicapped and given that it's a very flat site, they'll have easy access in the homes. So for people that might be older and looking to downsize and need 1-level living, this would work. Younger people, they might find this plan attractive as well. So really important to target it to a broad range of people. There is another third design that has a kind of a master bedroom on the first floor that has an exterior similar to the red design, the red cottage that we had. But overall, these homes intended to be pretty inexpensive. These would have an affordable component that would be for rent. Those rents would be in the range of about $1,900, which is pretty reasonable these days, even on an affordable scale. Particularly given the fact that they are, detached and your own residence, and generally they're modest in size, but again, compared to apartment living, they're substantial. So they generally range from about 1,200 to 1,400 square feet. I want to kick to the next one. I got a couple of different versions of the interior home sites, or the kind of the village residences. As Peter talked, you can see the detached garages in the back of the building. Again, trying to carry forward some of the architectural details and some of the flexibilities. We have a front porch with some battens, with some gables. This is a pretty modest size house. This is about 1,800 square feet. Fits really, really nicely on the lot. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, really comfortable layout. And I'll go through a floor plan on the next version, because the elements of the floor plans are pretty consistent throughout. We want to go to the next rendering, Peter. Again, this is another version, slightly bigger, but again, similar details, some metal roof details, a variety of treatment that we can use on the front of the house. Again, detached garages, broad front porch, and welcoming, kind of a more unique, stair tower here. I can show you the floor plan on this one, which is the next slide.
Mark, before you go on, I did have a question in the chat about the bungalow, the rental bungalow. Would this have a basement or other storage space areas in it?
The rentals would be on a slab. So there was, some closet space. There would be some pull down attic space as well for people to make use of. But it is intended for the cottages would be on a slab as compared to having a full basement. The homes themselves would have full basements for full utilization for people. Okay. These interior home sites in general, they range from about 1,800 square feet. They can go up to about 2,300 square feet. Again, these have the detached garages, somewhat of your backyard space that can be used in a variety of ways, as Peter had shown on some of the different renderings and 3D modeling. You've also got a nice amount of space on the front, on one side of the building, and we take this structure and match it with another one, so we kind of double up that space up front to give it a nice nice break of green with the homes as they're going through. The homes themselves, as I said, all have pretty similar elements. Nice kind of welcoming foyer, a first floor study in all the homes. The for sale properties, very important, obviously, with COVID, but even before COVID, that extra space is, I just have found it with buyers to be, more important than a formal dining room, more important than a formal living room. So whether it functions as a study or a playroom for the kids, or that separate space that you can utilize is what's important for your family is very useful. Kitchen, dining, and living are all really integrated as one open space in a kind of a modern design that you're seeing everywhere. Kitchens all have large islands, sizable dining room, comfortable living room with fireplace, kind of a smaller back porch, and half bath with a closet, and really kind of a nice little drop zone as an entrance as people are coming from the garage to be able to drop your keys, drop your phones, etc., and then come into the house. We've got kind of an interesting stair system to go upstairs. It's a little more unique. And then upstairs, really 3 very comfortable bedrooms, 2 full baths, laundry on the second level, where most people like it with the bedrooms, nice sized closets. So overall, a pretty efficient and comfortable design. And this, is something that will have different sizes for people based on their budget, that will range from 1,800 square feet to about 22 or 23, as I said. These homes also will have an affordable component. They would be sold based upon current pricing models in relation with Dhcd and current interest rates and taxes, etc. These homes would run roughly about 290,000 would be today's numbers. That would be the affordables, and the markets, depending on when we started, they probably start from 500 or so and go up based on the styling that people may select. The next slide is just another version of this interior home. Again, broad front porch. We've got a little bump out here that we utilize because we incorporated a first floor master on this design. We felt it was important to have a range of one level living for people that live locally or just want to be in the community, that may be concerned about dealing with stairs for your kind of classic empty nester layout. So we will have that, whether it's in the rental homes, as well as this size homes and mid-range homes, and the village residents all have that ability, and still kind of keep the footprint as it relates to the front of the street the same as the other one, and bumped it out a little bit on the back. So we can go to the next slide, Peter. This is a home that is what you saw in the modeling on the exterior. A little bigger footprint, as you can see. This home does have the garaging built into it. So it is a larger structure that has this side-loaded garage that Peter talked about. Again, similar details with the gables at the front, some metal roof detailing. Really attractive, beautiful front porch here. Kind of a side rear porch back here as well for that people can utilize coming and going with the garaging. The floor plan on this one, again on the next site. is this is designed with a first floor master as well. So we've got our study that we incorporate, first floor master with nice sized bedroom and closet. Again, nice, drop zone and mudroom as you come in and transition into the house. We put the laundry on the first floor here for people that may want the one level living. And then the back of the house is really opened up towards what would be the private space that you saw in some of the imaging. Again, nice big kitchen, large island, dining area, your fireplace, great room, lots of glass out on your private space. Again, kind of a rear porch that you can get out of the sun and potentially could expand a little bit if people wanted more area there. Upstairs, you end up with a substantial amount of space. You've got just the 2 bedrooms, full bath. So you got a loft area up there that could be an additional work area for people, or play area, study zone for kids. So it have a lot of flexibility for people's overall usage. So these homes, and this is, we call them kind of the parkland or the fairway residences, are on the exterior. So the lots are bigger, the setback is more substantial. These have the shared driveways, again, to limit the amount of breaks in the street scene and having for driveways. Garages are sizable, so for people to utilize. And much deeper setback in general to give them a more impressive feel. You want to go to the next slide, Peter? So this is just kind of the overall project summary. And the one component we didn't talk specifically about is these rental apartments that we're looking at for people that are 62 years and older. This is really, I think, one of what people will find is one of the most beneficial aspects of the site. We're going to be providing 25 apartments for people that are 62 years or older. These are looking to be much more modest residences. They might be, 600-700 square feet. The affordable units in this building, we're targeting to be down as low as 50% of the median. So we can actually have, rental apartments for qualified people as low as $1,100 a month. We situated it to be, so it can be kind of an attractive building on this town common. Also give people that are in there access to the green for activities and such that could be held here. You could, you can have, I've seen different places, they have movies or concerts or farmers markets and stuff. So the people that are living here would have immediate access to it. Obviously, they'd have access to the trail system that would be around the property, as well as just, walking within the inner loops. We kept some extra green space adjacent to it, so we can have some outdoor space for people that aren't as ambulatory and could take advantage of the broader walking paths. But there's so those 25 units, affordable ones, as I said, would be as low as $1,100, and all of those 25 homes would count towards the affordable housing component to the state limits. The rental cottages, I had shown you the kind of the red cottage and the white bungalow. These are located towards the back of the property. These would have kind of their own kind of common spaces that they can utilize as well. These would be a rental, again, would be an affordable component. The affordable component on these would go about $1,900 a month. And that square footage for those, as I had mentioned, is about 12 to 1,400 square feet. But really kind of cute little cottages, almost more beachy is what you'd see as compared to traditional housing. But our take on rentals within, the traditional neighborhood village concept as compared to, a large 3-story building as compared to some of the imaging that Peter had shown. And then we've got, there's about 124, not about, there are 124 of these total housing between the exterior lots and the interior lots. And again, these will range from about 1,800 to probably 2,800 at the max, with the average being, somewhere in between those. I thought one fact that Jesse had pointed out earlier, that since 2000, the average size home that's been built in Stowe has been about 3,300 square feet. So, we're really bringing that down substantially. and having a range of property available for people at a broad range of income. So from 700 square feet to 2,800 square feet, from $1,100 a month to probably, $1,900 for affordables, up to, maybe 2,700 for the detached rentals, and, home ownership opportunities probably from 500,000 up until, 800,000, or depending on where lumber goes. And again, having a broad range of options for younger people, for empty nesters, and older people as well that can utilize the elderly apartments. So really trying to get that broad range that you really wouldn't see in a traditional neighborhood, and incorporating all those elements and what we think will be a really attractive and marketable plan. Well, that's the overall proposal for the housing. I can go to the next slide, Peter. And
Good. Mark, did you take
On
a
to
couple
Justin.
of questions from the chat before we move on? A couple ones. This I might ask for some clarification. Someone asked, how close are the adjacent homes to one another? I think the answer probably varies, but maybe you could speak on that.
It does vary. If you look at the what we call the interior lots, those are about 50 by 100. So those are about 5,000 square feet. So on one side, we've got a limited offset that's about, I think probably you're looking at 10 to 15 feet to structures. On the other side, you're looking at about 30 feet from structure to structure. On the exterior lots, those are 75 by about 110 or by 110. And so those are set back further. Separation is more substantial on structure to structure. I think is probably 20 to 25 feet on one side, and about 50 feet on the other side, incorporating the driveway. So it's certainly denser than what you see in other areas, but I think a comfortable amount of space for people to utilize and enjoy.
Another one got, does DHCD consider age-restricted rentals qualifying for the subsidized housing inventory for Stowe?
Yes, it does. So that those 25 units within the building proposed for 62 plus, all of those would count as affordable units as it relates to the town SHI. Overall, there's 96 homes in here that's the count that would qualify towards the town's 10%, and this project should, depending on what the census numbers come out at, but this should get the town to 10% all the way through 2030. So really put the town in the position to make determinations of where you may want affordable housing in the future going forward, as compared to potentially being in the position that someone presents something and the town doesn't truly have the ability to stop. So we consider that a significant benefit, and that really drove some of the unit count discussions in terms of how many rentals, how many for sales, and what the overall benefit to the town would be.
And I think I'll just have one more. We are getting a lot of questions in, so we're not going to have time probably to answer all of them as they come in, but they are being recorded and they will get answered at a later date, if not in this meeting, or also perhaps the end here. One last question. Are the affordable cottages all rental, and if so, why rental?
No, the affordables are not all rental. There is so 25% of the rental cottages in the back. There's 40 of those proposed, so 10 of those would be affordable. In the front, elderly housing is 25 units that would be rental, that would count towards it. And of the for sale homes, 25% of them, so 31 homes would be sold to qualified first-time or qualified home buyers as well. So the affordability is spread throughout all three components of the proposal, the three different types of housing.
All right, thank you, Mark. I'm just going to build on a little bit of what Mark said briefly here, so we can put some of this type of development in context. And Peter, yeah, for whatever reason, our screen share controlling is not working, so I'll just have you advance the slides for me. But you know, we obviously looked at a big array of different types of units, different spacing, and what Mark was talking about around you know, having first floor master space, having a diversity of units, smaller units. If you look at what the original build out potential was for this property, it's clear that the market was not going to provide this type of development. And I think that is what is really compelling here, is that a lot of the towns in our region are facing just an unbelievable development pressure right now. Prices are sky high. To be able to get out in front of this a little bit really helps us, because in the planning department, we often are wringing our hands looking at the stats that are coming in through the census data, through our own local data, and then looking at what the market is producing. So we know that homes are just simply getting bigger and bigger, but if you look at the both local trends and national trends, families are simply getting smaller. We know that our older adult population is going to you know, mushroom after 2030, and we're going to have this kind of boom in the older adult population. Of course, it won't last forever. Things will fluctuate, but we need to be prepared to be able to allow people to have different options for housing. And again, what we are seeing produced as an average is simply not meeting that demand. And then I think something that's just pretty compelling is that, you know, we do have a lot of residents, up to 20% of residents in Stowe, that would qualify for affordable units, but 90% of the homes that we've constructed since the year 2000 would be out of their price range, which would force them into a kind of a cost burden scenario. So we have the data to know that without kind of interventions like this and some creativity around how we design housing and how we situate it, that we're not going to be able to kind of meet these demands. We'll miss that moment in some ways. So if you could go to the next slide, Peter. So I think, you know, as we've been kind of developing this together and thinking about this and looking at questions that people have provided, some of the key housing benefits, I just want to say these 25 older adult rentals, if you look across the state, and this is reflected in a lot of data that's come out of some different housing agencies and certainly in our own housing production plan, the most in-demand unit, bar none, is this older adult rental 62 plus. Especially when you get to that 50% level. There really are just so few entities, organizations, and companies building that kind of housing that we are just desperately in need of it. So to have something like that in Stowe for Stowe residents and for others is, I think, a great benefit from a housing prospect. The idea of actually having different tenure options is also something that's a big benefit for Stowe. You know, there's obviously people at different points in their lives, starting families, downsizing, you know, you have divorcees, you have all these different people at different points in their life where different tenure options make sense. And I can tell you just from, you know, from hiring staff, from moving here myself, you know, trying to find a rental in Stowe is not an easy prospect. And so this, again, is one of those things that really kind of gets at that core need that we have in town. The idea of creating units where folks can age in place, those first floor masters, you've heard us talking a lot about that in other parts of town as well. I've talked with other planners that find that multi-generational families can also utilize those types of homes. So these are the kinds of benefits that really allow us to create kind of diverse, livable communities. And I think what happens when the market is the way that it is it really pushes towns like Stowe and in our region more toward exclusivity, whether we like it or not. And it's really helpful to be able to present ideas that kind of get a foot in the door and open it for others to be included. And the last thing I'll mention on what Mark had said about the state's 10% requirement. Most people are familiar now with the state law that requires towns to have a 10% of their housing stock be priced for qualifying people at affordable levels. And so Mark is correct in saying that this is a giant leap forward to be able to get this number of affordable units, not only to be able to get this number of affordable units, but to be able to do it in unison with the types of open space preservation and the types of thoughtful design. If you look around at our neighboring communities, you often see these big things go up to town meeting, and should we just take this big proposal? It's 250 units. It'll get us to 10%. None of them are as compelling, as interesting, and meet as many goals as a project like this. And I am happy to be a part of it. And I know that a lot of my peers are looking at this thinking, wow, how has this come together? So really some exciting benefits from the housing end. If you could go to the next slide, please. Now, whether we were talking about this project, we could be talking about any project, even if this were not going to town meeting. We know that in a market like this, where we're kind of in the midst of a big interest in housing, that we're going to need to manage growth. And one of the things that is a constant factor is traffic. We hear it all the time on different committees and in our different work. And so we've been thinking a lot about this. We obviously heard some questions about this as well after the last forum. Some of the things that we're thinking about to be able to manage this, and I'll admit we can't have all the questions or the answers at the moment, but some of the ideas are to think about where are the most impacts likely to be, whether it was from this project or even this project as it existed as conventional build out. Where would most of those vehicles be going? Can we plan some investments right now, get them in the pipeline? Can we explore partnerships, whether that's with development communities, with the state for the types of housing that we're creating, to get some help updating infrastructure in the right places? Of course, we can do that kind of micro level examination. We can look at intersection functionality right around the development itself. That is the kind of stuff that a traffic study can really do well. We can look at turning counts. We can get a better sense of what we're expecting around traffic. And we've already kind of started that process. And one of the things that we're really curious about and looking at is we're doing some research into traffic generation around golf and also around all these different types of housing. Typically, we just have a subdivision and it's all single family units, and you can get a pretty good sense like, okay, it's going to be 10 trips a day, and you do the math. But with this type of development, we've got so many different potential demographics, different size units, different types of families and people that may move in. It's a little more complicated. But essentially what we're hoping to be able to do is to be able to really think about what does the gradual decrease in golf over time, how does that offset the increase in the housing traffic as well? And so I think it's just fair to make sure that we're understanding kind of the give and take and some of the different land uses around some of the traffic impacts. And so that's all something that we're going to continue to be looking at, if and when this project continues to move forward. Another aspect of the growth management on the next slide, Peter, is town services. So what we've been doing, we've got a couple of age-restricted developments in town, and although this is not one of those developments, there is a component. So one of the things that we want to think about is how did those other developments potentially impact Council on Aging services? That's a discussion we want to get going so that we can just understand what we may be looking at down the line as the years go on. And we've also been reaching out to our public safety departments to try to get a sense of what kinds of calls did you receive when our last developments went in. What's the difference between the types of call volumes, the types of calls you receive at, let's say, a Regency at Stowe versus a Sylvan Drive? How can we start to extrapolate some numbers and really understand, what kind of staffing levels and what kinds of things would we need to plan for going forward? And again, I say this I think this is good planning, period. It happens to overlap with a time of real housing growth. So this is the time to be asking these questions, certainly when we have a project like this. And lastly, we do on the next slide, Peter, we want to think about what are the financial impacts of a project like this. So we've luckily enough, we've got this close relationship now after working on this project. We've been able to actually see the kinds of pro forma and ideas that Mark has been developing in conjunction with everybody. So we have a sense at some preliminary projections based on some pretty good education and demographic data around school children, some from New Jersey, some from other projects in other places here in Stowe. But the feeling is that there could be as much as $400,000 in property tax revenue surplus on an annual basis from a development like this. And that is just different. And I think the reason why we see that surplus numbers because of that housing diversity really, it really just throws some new variables into the mix. under conventional development, we could very well be looking at 3,000 square foot, 4-bedroom homes. This is just a different makeup, and it really provides some benefits, I think, financially as well. And so, you know, what we're going to do is continue to kind of cross-reference that data. I want to ground truth that a little bit more. Talk with our assessors, you know, talk with other folks that may be able to say, okay, yeah, you know, this looks about right. You know, we're providing the correct kind of variables as far as town service impacts. We want to try to be as responsible and honest on the growth management aspects as we can be, so that we can, frankly, respond to it in the best possible way. So, so I really wanted to just make sure that level of planning, that folks recognize that there's a good amount of thought currently going into that, and that's going to just be something that we have to continue, which is why I can't have anything too polished in terms of answers. But I appreciate the time, and I will hand it back over. Thank you.
All right. For the last part of tonight's presentation, we wanted to give you an overview of the conservation and recreation aspects of the proposed plan, and also give you an update on how the planning for these uses has evolved over the past couple of months with the team. And so just as a reminder, the concept plan calls for the purchase of a conservation restriction for continued golf use on the south course, along with a recreational trail easement. On the north course, the land that is not proposed for development would be purchased by the town for a variety of conservation and recreation uses. So I'm going to go through each of these in a little bit more detail. Next slide, Peter. So turning first to the south course, we will be asking the town at town meeting next week to approve funding for purchase of a permanent conservation restriction on the entirety of the 151 acres of the south course. That conservation restriction would permanently restrict future development of the south course while allowing the land to remain in golf, and that would be owned and managed by Stow Acres. The conservation restriction will spell out in detail what uses are allowed and not allowed. So for instance, the owners will be allowed to perform maintenance activities on the golf course. They'll be allowed to relocate the driving range from its current location north of Randall Road onto the south course, and then reconfigure the tees and greens to accomplish that. There'll also be a building envelope around the clubhouse, the maintenance barn, and the parking lot in the area shown in red that will specify in detail what can happen with those structures, what expansion is allowed. And then the conservation restriction will also include a recreational trail easement for a multi-use trail around the perimeter of the property. That is shown here conceptually in blue. The exact location of the trail will be determined before the restriction is finalized. Next slide. For those that haven't had an opportunity to walk the south course, I can attest that the trail offers just some really stunning views out over the Assabet River, of Rock Bottom Farm to the south, and then over wetlands to the south and west of the golf course. Next slide. The plan for the north course, which would be considered at a future town meeting, has a number of elements, as Peter described earlier. So first, the town would acquire all of the land that's not included in the development area. The exact acreage is still being determined, but it's approximately 112 acres. The town's use of the north course would include areas for conservation, for recreation, and for ongoing golf. So let's look briefly at each of these. Next slide. As we highlighted in the first forum, we believe there is significant potential for ecological restoration of the existing driving range to a wet meadow and marsh habitat. Historically, this area was drained and altered, much of it before we have the wetland laws that we have today. So if you take a current map of the driving range, an air photo, and you kind of outline the areas that are shown here, and then on the next slide, you switch to an historical USGS map of the area, you can see that much of that area was historically wetland. The photo on the bottom on the right is the wetland that's immediately adjacent to the driving range. And the photo on the top shows standing water on frozen ground on the driving range itself. We are currently working with a team from the Mass Division of Ecological Restoration to evaluate the potential for the restoration of this area. Next slide. One of the things that we know is that with just a little bit of help, nature has an amazing ability to transform the landscape, as can be seen here in a similar but larger project at Tidmarsh Farm in Plymouth, where abandoned cranberry bogs were transformed into a highly functioning wetland system under the guidance of the same folks that we're working with from the Commonwealth, and in a remarkably short period of time. Next slide. Also part of the plan is the habitat restoration of several of the greens at the northern end of the North Course and closest to Elizabeth Brook and Wheeler Pond into upland grassland habitat along the brook. This will improve water quality in Wheeler Pond and Elizabeth Brook and also provide open meadow habitat that is increasingly uncommon in Massachusetts. Next slide. At the last forum, we discussed that part of the plan is to provide a large area for a town recreation facility. The need for additional ball fields was called out in the 2016 Open Space and Recreation Plan for the town as a priority. This slide is just a conceptual layout of soccer and baseball fields on what is about a 12 to 15 acre parcel to give you a sense of what could be possible. But the actual plan will be developed by the Recreation Commission and Recreation Department and would likely begin with the development of a master plan for the site, similar to what was done at Stowe Community Park. We, through the emails after the first forum, we've received quite a few suggestions for things that could be part of this recreation facility, and we've forwarded those along to the Recreation Department for their further consideration. Next slide. These two photos give you a sense of the land that has been identified for recreational use. And with the exception of the row of trees between the two greens on the slide at the right, it is remarkably flat and open and quite dry, something that is much needed to address the perennial wet conditions that exist at many of the town's current fields. Next slide. About half of the land that the town would acquire on the North Course would be leased back to Stow Acres to be operated as a 9-hole golf course. This is currently envisioned as a 10-year lease back with lease payments defraying the town's acquisition costs. At the end of the lease period, this additional land would be available for town conservation and recreation purposes, and the lease will give us time to determine how best to use it. Next slide. And lastly, the North Course would also have a long distance trail looping around it and connecting the various elements of the project together, providing an amenity both for town residents and for residents of the development. Next slide. This project aligns really well with the goals and priorities that are contained in the town's open space and recreation plan. One of the highest priorities was for the town to plan proactively for the future of its golf courses and determine which areas are most important to protect and which are most suitable for development. Other priorities that are in the plan include the identification of additional opportunities for walking and cycling in Stowe, identification of a large site to meet future recreation needs, and more accessible trails for Stowe's aging population. So this project aligns really nicely with those goals. And then last slide. Some of the other goals that are met by the project include providing open space and recreation opportunities in what we refer to as the underserved or southwest quadrant of Stowe. That's the area that's south of Route 117 and west of Route 62. Also protection of scenic views, protection of riparian corridors along the Assabet River and Elizabeth Brook, and maintaining golf course use of the site. And with that, I will turn it over to Bob to wrap up.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. I'm going to take a guess, and my guess is that a lot of the people in the audience tonight will be in agreement with me that what we're looking at is a really, really compelling opportunity for the town of Stowe. And especially when you compare that this opportunity, with all the different components that it involves, with the other option of if the property were developed under traditional subdivision or even under our open space bylaw, open space subdivision bylaw, large portions of the property would be consumed by the residential development. And so the community benefits would be much more narrow and really primarily accruing to those who could afford to live in those very large homes on very large lots. And instead, what we're looking at is a 330 acre footprint that has tremendously compelling conservation components that Kathy just walked us through. Fantastic additional active recreation capacity, and exactly the types of housing that we most need in Stowe. And we know what we need. We've known that for years, as Jesse described. Next slide. It's also a comprehensive outcome. It answers the question once and for all, just what's going to happen with the 330 acres that exists at Stow Acres Country Club. Next slide. Golf is one of the defining elements of the town of Stowe. In many ways, it's golf and orchards in so many ways. So this project assists golf continuing as an active land use on this landscape off into the future. And next, and what's also important is that Stow Acres is a particularly important golf course in the many golf courses that we have in town, that we're so fortunate to have in town. Stow Acres has the Randall Homestead, the historic significance of that. And perhaps more importantly, it was the location of the Black men's national championships in the 1920s. And those are things we should be really proud of. And so helping preserve Stow Acres, especially the South Course, which was the site of that national championships in the 1920s, preserving that off into the future is a really important piece. Next slide. It also, as Kathy just described so well, fantastic open space protection components to this overall, between the active recreation, the conservation restriction on 150 acres in the south, the town's purchase of 112 acres on the north, and even the green spaces within the housing pod. Fully 90% of the open space that exists at Stow Acres will be preserved going forward. Next slide. And it will provide access opportunities. Trails are a big, big theme here, not just for an enhancement for the development, for the housing pod and those who live there. And that will be tremendous as an amenity for those folks right out their back doors, as an integrated part of the overall landscape. But it will also be a destination for everyone who lives in Stowe to be able to go there, whether you're a young family, whether you're a senior, to be able to go and enjoy the outdoors on this and have better connections with things like the Assabet River and Elizabeth Brook. Next slide. It also just happens to be located in the southwest quadrant of Stowe, where it's really been underserved historically. Stowe is a town where conservation has been a priority and really something that the community has supported since the beginning of time. And yet the southwest quadrant is the area that we need to make some additional progress on, so that the provision of open space is more equitable throughout the town. This is a golden opportunity to do exactly that. Next slide. In terms of the additional recreation facility potential here, especially as golf phases out, it's really tremendous. We're talking about flat, for the most part, dry, good soils. Really, some of the best opportunity that I know of in town is what we're looking at right here. And next. It also provides opportunities for additional community garden capacity if that's something we wanted to do. And next, and even a community pool if we wanted to build, create a community pool on this site. That's something we could do. There'll be plenty of room to do that. Next. As important as all of the things that I just talked about are, you know, I've actually come to think that the most important part of this whole thing is the housing components, because they deliver the types of housing with a big, big focus on affordability at all levels. So it's really smaller structures on smaller lots for smaller selling prices. That's really what we're talking about here. And doing it in a way through the collaborative approach that we've had with the Conservation Trust and the town planning and conservation stakeholders, working with the owner and the developer, and the very talented planner, Peter Flinker, we've been working with. We have this wonderful concept of New England village design and very livable, high quality of life environment that's being created. Next. And the designs, I think, you know, they're beautiful, all of them. They're just very, very attractive. And you can tell right away, they're going to be beautiful places to live. Great front porches. I love the fact that the automobiles, the cars are very much kept out of the way. In the background, the focus being more on individuals and relationships in communities. Next. Whether it's a senior couple looking to downsize, great opportunities there, or next. And this between, because of the approach and the heavy focus on affordability and attractiveness and a quality of life, this project really should help with diversity in Stowe on many, many different levels, which will really help enrich and complete Stowe as a community. So that's why we're all excited about this. Importantly, at town meeting, what we're going to be considering in a couple of weeks is the approval from town meeting to purchase a permanent conservation restriction on the south side, the 150-acre south course, the historic 150-acre south course, for $1.5 million. And that would be with existing Community Preservation Act funds on hand. That was approved unanimously by the Community Preservation Committee. We thank them for that. That is an essential component of all of these pieces coming to become reality, just as at a future town meeting, where we will return with a warrant article for the purchase of the 112 acres on the north course. Very important to understand that those are both absolutely essential to making this whole comprehensive outcome happen. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jesse.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you to everyone on the project team for everything tonight. And I want to thank everybody out that's listening now. Still bizarre to not be able to see you all and in a big room, but I know that we talked for quite a while here. I think you know, to be able to wrap this up, what we'd like to do is see if Malcolm has some more questions that have come in. And Malcolm, I think what I'll ask you to do is first try to identify if you've seen any common questions or any things that come in that you can kind of lump together so we can make sure we're kind of getting the most bang for the buck for questions here. And then I think what I'll do is try to maybe hand those to members of the project team, given that we're not in person. It's a little clunky, but we'll try to get some things answered for folks. Hopefully that will work.
Okay, so we've gotten a lot of questions in, around approaching 30 now. There's a couple common ones I've seen. One, a good one to start with, I think, is just to confirm the total number of units that is being proposed for the development pod. I've had a few questions of that.
Yeah. Mark, you want to tackle the number?
Yeah, the total number of units proposed is 189 units. So again, the breakdown is 25 elderly apartments, people age 62 and older. And those would have an affordable component at 50% of the median. The rental cottages, there's 40. Those would be primarily 2 bedrooms, but some 3 bedrooms to comply with state standards. And 10 of those would be affordable at the lower level, the 25%. And the for sale component is 124 homes, of which 25% of those would be sold to income eligible first time home buyers. The price for the affordable units would be roughly $290,000, as I had mentioned before. And one thing too, and I think Jesse had talked about, the need for the elderly housing, that, quite frankly, that the reason you don't see them built very much is because they don't really work financially. We're able to do it here, and we included it really because the land, the infrastructure, the wells, wastewater treatment facility, that's really all being constructed for the balance of the project. But that's really the only way that it works, just as a standalone project without direct subsidies. It just traditionally doesn't work at all. So the total is that 189 units, of which 96, so over half of them, or just about half of them, over half of them would be count towards the town's affordable housing standards. Count.
Thanks, Mark.
Another question I've seen a couple of people ask, is this a 40B development?
I'll take a stab at that. It would be developed under a comprehensive permit, which is under the state statute for Chapter 40B, yes.
Sorry, I'm still trying to just calculate questions that are coming in at the same time, trying to give them to you. So let's see. Guess a question for Kathy. Wouldn't the wetlands restoration overflow into the recreation fields? Maybe some specificity about the location of those relative to one another. That question makes sense to you?
Yeah, I don't have an easy map, but basically the area of the driving range is very low and wet and kind of ringed by streams and intermittent streams. And the rec fields are much higher. So topographically, that wouldn't be an issue.
Pardon me for a second, I'm trying to write down questions. I think I'm just gonna hold up on that for a second. So let's see. Who would own and oversee the rental units? A few people ask the question.
They would be privately owned and operated by my entity for the rentals, both the cottage rentals and the elderly rentals. So we would work on the elderly rentals. We would work with the local council on aging and housing authority if there's services that wanted to be provided or augmented. And there will be some common space available for people to utilize within the building. But they would all be privately owned.
I think, Jesse, this is probably a question for you. Has there been any discussion of small commercial lots near the entrance to the village, for example, a general store or 1 or 2 small restaurants?
No, there really hasn't. And it's something that came up early on in the discussion. Perhaps if the geographic location of Stow Acres were slightly different, that question might be a little more relevant. But it is still set off on its own a little bit. So, Mark, having dealt with kind of these types of questions before, maybe you can have a better answer. But the one thing I will add is that there had been some discussion about the potential for some sort of clubhouse or community amenity that could be another version of a kind of gathering space for folks that are living at the development. So not the exact same as the retail component, but nonetheless, that's something that was discussed.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, even at 189 units, it sounds like a lot of people, but it's really not that much to be able to service or justify retail. Randall Road is a cut through street, but it's not a main route that people are traveling on a regular basis. You really need that existing traffic to be productive with retail or commercial, commercial particularly these days. So we did talk about it very early on, but I just didn't think it was the right location for it to drive more traffic to it. Yeah.
Let's see here. Mark, I think you may have actually mentioned it in one of your other answers, but could you give an idea of the typical cost of one of the units with their first floor master bedroom?
Yeah, it would really depend on the size of it. Again, we're going to have homes that will range. For for sale homes, that we're looking to start at about 1,800 square feet in the $500,000 range based on, what we're dealing with today. But there could be homes with rentals at first, with first floor masters in the bungalows for people that aren't quite in the position to purchase. And we'll have homes up to 2,700 square feet or $800,000 that would have first floor masters. So the intention is to have that availability throughout the range of product on a for sale and a rental basis for people at all income levels.
Is there an idea, a general idea on the location of the septic system?
We have done some kind of broad range testing across the site to evaluate the soil suitability. Right now, it's possible we could have the leach field on the town green because the soils there are attractive and it's a sizable enough space for it. But that it could be dispersed in other locations as well. All the soils there are very good. The groundwater is low, so it does provide for some flexibility. Keep in mind, we will have, one wastewater treatment facility that will deal with all the effluent on the site. So the leach fields are actually relatively compact because with the wastewater treatment facility, it's really essentially a brown water that's going into the ground. It's really all the contaminants have been taken out of it. So the leach fields are pretty compact. That gives us a lot more flexibility.
Jesse, I think this next one might be a question for you. After this development, are there any plans for sidewalks on Gleesondale Road?
It's a great question. One of the things that I think has been a benefit and a compelling kind of piece of this project is that when we went through the Complete Streets Prioritization Plan process, there was a lot of comments about how dangerous people felt about, or how unsafe people felt about using Gleesondale Road, not only for walking, but for cycling too. And one of the ideas that was posited at one of our public forums was, is there an opportunity to kind of create a shadow trail or another way to get that same north to south connection without being on Gleesondale Road? So some of the slides that we showed with the with this kind of looping trail, that was really the origin of that idea in a lot of ways, was just thinking about some of those comments and really feeling like, hey, there actually could be an opportunity here for some north to south connections that not only span just this development, but hopefully in the future could connect down in some way, perhaps to Gleesondale and further north, so that people felt like they do have an option to get off of Gleesondale. So the answer is no, sidewalks have not been specifically included in this proposal, but we have thought about how to mitigate that issue.
Let's see if I could just add to that.
Sure.
The way we've designed the trail, it intentionally kind of stubs at the boundary line with Butternut. So if at some point in the future we had an opportunity to either do this kind of planning there, or if there was a developer that came in, there is the potential to extend that trail to Wheeler Road, and then that would get you through kind of all the Gleesondale S curves, or at least most of them.
Thanks. That's great.
Jesse, this might also be another question for you. Is the 10% affordability that's been discussed based on the current housing stock or the housing stock following completion of this development?
Jeez, these are all really good questions. So that is a moving target, but best answer I can give you right now is we know what our current subsidized housing inventory number is based upon. We also have been running our own numbers internally to try to, basically because we're impatient, we don't want to wait till September when the new census data comes out. We're trying to get a sense of where do we expect to be with that number. So we have been specifically looking at our best estimates for current numbers of housing units and thinking about how that might actually come out in the decennial for 2020. Long story short, we do expect that we can still be at 10%. Or substantially close to that number. It's going to, like I said, because everything, we don't know what the 2020 census is, it's difficult, but we are definitely in that ballpark for sure, based on our projections from 2020.
Yeah, and just to add to just say that if it once the 2020 census is out, and if with this project approval and you meet it, that stays in place until the next census of 2030. So, and that provides, you know, another decade really to just stay in compliance. Once you get in compliance, getting in compliance is very hard. Once you're in compliance and with inclusionary zoning and things that you have incorporated in a lot of your other you know, your other zoning aspects, that, you know, keeping that 10% is much easier as compared to getting there in the first place, because you got to, you know, jump up over everything that's been built for, you know, for the last 200 years. So that would provide coverage for the next decade, really, which is significant.
And you know, and DHCD, the state agency for housing, is also pays attention to the progress that you're making towards that housing. So the rate of production and so yeah, there's a few benefits from that kind of you know, policy end with the state here.
It might be helpful just to make sure the whole audience is understanding the concept that we've been talking about a couple of times here about 40Bs and affordable housing quotas. I'll try to do it as simply as possible. If a community has less than 10% of their housing stock certified as meeting affordable levels as certified by the state, then a developer can come in and propose a development that has at least 25% of the units are developable, 75% are not. It's often done in a very aggressive way where the town is reacting to a proposal, often a very large development. And this we're really talking about here is also a 40B, but it's really the more friendly and really town cooperative, town sponsored, working with the owner and the developer to use the comprehensive permit creatively to be able to do exactly what the owner, the developer, and the town want to see happen. So I hope that's helpful to folks.
Mark, I have another question for you. Can you give a general time frame, the anticipated completion for the housing component? Build out time, I guess.
Sure. I mean, what the plan will be is if the town makes the decision to move forward with the conservation restriction on the south course, then I would work to put together the applications for submittal to the town for the site approval letter, the first kind of step of the comprehensive permit. Then seek state approval, and then look for, you know, then I'd be coming back for the detailed approval and detailed design review for the town. So really, even from this town meeting, we're looking at probably 12 to 18 months to get the project planned before anything would start realistically. The build out for the project, we're looking at realistically probably 3 to 4 years. that would be, 30 to 40 houses a year for absorption, which is, a comfortable pace. Obviously, the market and things will dictate it, but I think realistically, a 4-year build cycle is a practical guideline. Could be a little quicker if things go well. Could be a little longer if the market modifies one way or another. But that's a reasonable estimate.
This question, I don't know, this could be answered by any number of people, I think. How can we ensure that the development is attractive to diverse buyers? Are we relying simply on price point for that?
I think the design and the price point does a lot. As part of, if people are talking about, the housing component, obviously we look to provide as broad of outreach as possible for people. The affordable programs are specific requirements for affirmative action, if that's specifically what people are looking for. But I think what is the most important thing is a broad price range opens it up to a broader range of people. If these are all 3,300 square foot homes at $1.2 million, it's a very limited group that can afford them. And that's essentially what you'd have being developed at that site. So, you bring that, cut that number down in half or better and start there, then, now you've got a much larger percentage of people that can afford to live in the community. And, we'll have different property sizes and styles to try to meet those needs.
Jesse, I think this question is best answered by you. Could a owner or someone who purchased one of the homes being talked about here later expand on the footprint of that house? Could a shed or, for example, a workroom be built attached to it? Would this be permitted or would it be by special permit? How would that work?
It's really too early to say, but generally the way that other comprehensive permits have worked is that typically the permitting authority, in this case it would be the Zoning Board of Appeals, would approve a plan that would show some sort of development envelope, exclusive use area sometimes if it's a condominium, or even in some cases specific setbacks that relate to that development that's shown on the plan. So I think a good plan will provide that kind of guidance in the plan document itself, so that towns are not left to try to figure it out after the fact. And so I think it's a good point, and I'm glad Mark's here to hear it and everybody else, and that's something to consider going forward. But that kind of thing has come up in the past, and there have been plans that have had certain setbacks on there, and just going back to the plan and figuring out the process from there.
Yeah, and just to add on it, that is some of the things that Peter Flinker and I had talked about when we were looking specifically at these size lots of 50 by 100 and 75 by 110. Is where do the buildings go? What are the offsets? So we've done a lot to try to build that in, and those kind of guidelines will stay with the project going forward, as Jesse said. But we are contemplating what people could do and putting in appropriate flexibility or appropriate controls, depending on what your preference is, to maintain a reasonable community but give people the flexibility with their own home.
I think that covers most of the questions that can be answered here. There's a few that are more feedback and some more very specific questions I think would be best answered in written form. Although one question actually, Mark, a few people have asked, where can people see your other work?
Probably the closest project that people could go and see it. Look, I recently finished a project in Bolton on Sugar Road, right across from where the Colonial Candies is. So that was a 40B that I developed in conjunction with a partner. We just finished it about a year ago. So it's a collection of 30 detached cottages clustered around green space. Similar aspect, the structures, you'll see some elements of the design that are there. But one of the things we really tried to focus on there as well was to, kind of have the car be in the back seat. So you see the access for parking is all along the sides of the property, and we tried to make it walkable and lots of green space and lighting and common area in between. So I think that's is something that people can see that will be, very relevant, and that's close for people to take a look at. That's newer too.
And actually, I spoke to, so we got two of the same question right at the same time, basically. Will there be a homeowners association of some sort?
What the intention is, and what the way that we have laid it out with the quote, the lots, that people would acquire the lots. But yes, there would be a homeowners association that would deal with, the common parkland areas and common area maintenance, maintaining the wastewater treatment facility and the wells. Those are, expensive. The systems to put in, reasonably expensive to operate. So, with the number of people that we have, what makes it affordable across the board. So yes, there would be a homeowners association that would have overriding control of things. Yes.
Okay, I think that covers most of the questions that we received. I did mention there's a few more longer questions and very specific things that I think we better answered in writing, but I think that covers most of the things we've gotten.
Thanks, Malcolm, for clerking that for us. I think what we'll do specifically is we'll take a look at those questions, and maybe we can amend the FAQ that we have on the website, and some of those answers can live up there. Obviously, everything's evolving, and so new questions come up. Others are no longer relevant, but we'll try to make sure that everything is up there. And then the last thing I'll say is just remember that, after this, if you want to make sure a question is accurately logged and we all have it, Stow Acres Plan at stow-ma.gov is the email address that we're still taking questions, comments, and that kind of thing at. So I just want to thank everybody again, everybody on the project team, everybody that came out for a couple hours tonight to talk about this. And I look forward to seeing at least some of you in person at town meeting on the 22nd.
And just a quick note that this is Article 54 at town meeting, so it'll be the second to last. Come early, stay late, and we look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good night.
Thanks.